That looks pretty good. Alright, this is part 21 of a series of step-by-step restoration of the Singer Model 337. And while I've been working up at the front end of this machine, there's one more adjustment down here in the bobbin hook area, and that is thread clearance. Thread clearance. So, I took the plates off here so that you could see better, but you may have seen the video where the hook comes around and with the needle thread and hits this cast off area and lets the thread go. Well, now I've got the bobbin holder and the cushion spring installed here, so I want to adjust the thread clearance is this space right there between the bobbin holder and the actual cushion spring. So the thread clearance has to be within a range, because if it's too tight of an area or too narrow, when the thread comes around and casts off, it can get hung up right here. And then the hook, of course, is going to go back and get another thread and another. And maybe some of you have experienced that kind of a problem with a big tangle here and everything freezes up. Sometimes you can't even raise the needle up because the thread is so hardly trapped over here. But if the gap is too big, then the bobbin holder can rock and back and forth here as the thread comes over this. It kind of pulls the bobbin holder towards the cushion spring and then back. So if there's too big a gap here, this really starts jumping around back and forth, and it gets a lot noisier. And when the thread casts off, it can get kind of tangled up on the back of the bobbin and so forth. So there's a factory setting for this thread clearance gap, and on this particular model it's between 0.010 inches at the narrow end and 0.015 inches at the wider end. And you really do need a feeler gauge to set the gap or set the clearance properly. If you watch my other videos, you've seen this before. So on this gauge, it just so happens that 0.010 is the thinnest piece of metal I have, and of course it goes up from there. So the way that you want to set this is you will be turning the hand wheel towards you, and it's a lot harder to see right now, but this is the hook point right over here coming around. And when it comes right here, the cast off point, it'll be in line with the heel of this bobbin holder, and that's where it's going to cast off the thread, and the thread will be dragging over here, and the hook will cast it off, and it'll go back through here and wrap around the bobbin thread, and that's how you make a lock stitch. So if we see how I can do this here, if you see the hook coming around right there, and then there is the point of the hook here, and it just would have cast off the thread, then it's gonna go back and look for a new thread. It's gonna come down again cast off another thread. So when you do this, you want to get that point in the cast off position, more or less, right down there when you set the gap. Okay, and then what I'll do is just slip the feeler gauge right in here between the spring and the heel, and I see, look, it's loose. You know, there's not any drag on it. So I know I'm above the minimum because this is a 0.010. Let's just call it a 10. So I know I'm above that. So the next thing I would want to do would be to get out my 15 or my 0.015 and see how that is, because it should be perfect or too tight, and it's still a little loose. See that? So I'm above the maximum according to the factory of a 0.015. So it would probably sew, but it might be loud and it may have some problems. In my experience, it would just be unnecessarily loud. Is it the thread drug over it and it snapped kind of back and forth. So let's see if we can set that down to 0.015, and I usually set it towards the high end, in the middle or towards the high end, because it's really annoying to me if thread gets stuck here. And a mechanical machine, let's face it, it's a little bit more noisy than some of the new electronics. And when you're sewing, seamsters have told me, and tailors, that they don't really hear that noise. The noise is just a background thing to them. They don't notice it unless something sounds different or weird. But the cushion spring right here is held in place by this screw up here, which goes in and screws right down into the base of the hook assembly. And I call it the swivel screw. And that's because under the head of the screw there's like a space or a gap that doesn't have any threads. And when you tighten this screw up, it's engineered perfect that the screw bottoms out, and then that gap above the threads and below the head of the screw is what the cushion spring bracket, that's the space for it. And I call it the swivel screw because when you want to remove your bobbin holder, you lift this up and you swivel it over to the side so you can get in there to release your bobbin, or get your bobbin holder out and clean the area, clean your bobbin holder. And then when you're done with that, you're going to swivel it back, and you're going to be sure that the hole up here is centered right over this screw, and that holds it in place. And I call this screw the adjustment screw, because when you want to change the thread clearance here, that's what you do. You go in here to you're in your hooks in your cast off, and this is good and centered on the screw. You come in here and you would loosen the adjustment screw, and then you would set your feeler gauge in here. In this case, that's 0.15, and you would nudge this over till it's resting. That's a little tight. It's got quite a bit of drag there. It's bending the cushion spring. So let me back it off. I got plenty of, and I hope you can see how wiggly and loose that is. And I'm going to try and gently nudge it back over to where that, in my other hand here, to where it's see, it's hard for me. I think that's why it was a little too big. Whoever said it last time just settled for about a 0.017 or 8. But let's be, if we loosen this a little more, that's pretty loose. Just gonna nudge it into place here. Now I'm feeling a little drag on the feeler gauge, so I can tell I'm almost there. But when I put it in this point, I don't see the spring have to flex back to accommodate it. So I'm going to call that good. And with the gauge in there, I'm going to carefully tighten this up while trying not to move the cushion spring. And we'll see how I did here. Yeah, just barely feel some drag. And to get in there, I don't have to bend this cushion spring back. So I think I've got it set real good at the 15 or the 0.015. And then just rotate it, make sure everything is tight. Yep. So again, this little screw back here, what I call the swivel screw, or could call it the mounting screw, because boy, that's tight. That's good. You want to make sure that's got to be tight. Once you do your adjustment, this has to be tight. But because of the gap in the thread up here, that's why you can lift it and swivel it out of the way. Got to get it up above the adjustment screw, and then you can go in there and you can get your bobbin holder clean and get it out and adjust it. So that's it. Now, I haven't even sewed on this machine. I just tested it in the last video or two to see if the motor actually worked. I did use my ohm meter, just continuity on the wires while I had them all out, and that was very basic test, but nothing like running the motor, and then I'll be sewing on it. But I go through and make all the adjustments, and then sometimes when I sew, it's good. Everything is great. Sometimes I have to go back and tweak the thread tension, or maybe tweak this gap a little bit, or I find I have to make a minor adjustment to the needle bar, or the stitch width or stitch length, whatever. But I go through and set stuff and check it at the factory before I reassemble the whole machine. Because to sew, test sew, I'm going to put it back together, and the way it should be, and then sew. So that's it. That's the thread clearance. It's really easy with this. I know it was less than $10. I just bought it at O'Reilly Auto Parts, which is a few blocks down the road from me, and it's come in super handy. And I don't know how I would set this. I guess I just guess at it and put it back together and sew, and if it didn't work, take it apart and redo it. I might have to do that, but probably not. That's it. So that finishes this whole area up here, and I did the presser foot height, did all these adjustments were good. I'm just going to do the next video. I'll finish up with the upper thread tension unit. I'll tweak that a little bit in my next video. That'll be number 22. So thanks for watching part 21, the thread clearance setting. I hope you found it useful. Take care.